HOA bulldozed 500 acres of my family's farmland. Claimed it was for the community. Claimed eminent domain. What they didn't know, I control every bite of food that enters their gates. Now their shelves are empty, their kids go hungry, and their HOA president is facing federal charges. They tried to erase my legacy. Instead, I rewrote theirs. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. I've never been much for drama. My name's Cole Whitman, and I've lived on this land my entire life, just like my father did, and his father before him. Our farm sits on the edge of a sleepy township, nestled between two low ridgelines, the kind of place where morning fog clings to the soil, and the stars still outnumber the streetlights. We're not flashy, not rich, but what we have is ours. 500 acres of good, honest earth. This land raised me. I took my first steps between rows of sweet corn, learned responsibility bottle-feeding calves before school, and fell in love under the old oak tree that still guards the barn. My wife passed a few years back, cancer. But even now, the land holds her memory. It's not just dirt and crops, it's blood and legacy. I run things a little different than my grandfather did. We're fully solar-powered now, and I run an organic rotation, heirloom beans, rotational corn, and alfalfa that feeds local dairies. I even lease out a portion for a community-supported agriculture program, CSA style. It's not just farming, it's a living ecosystem, one that feeds hundreds of families every week. That used to be enough. Until the HOA came. About 4 years ago, just beyond the East Ridge, a developer bought up an old pasture that had been dormant since the Eisenhower era. Said they were building a gated eco-community called Whispering Hills. That name always made me laugh. There's nothing whispering about what came next. First came the trucks, then the noise, and then the signs. Future site of Whispering Hills HOA, luxury living begins here. Suddenly, where deer once grazed, there were identical beige homes stacked like dominoes, plastic turf lawns, and solar panels pitched at perfect HOA-approved angles. And of course, the inevitable gate, as if a keypad and camera would keep nature from seeping in. That's when she arrived. Her real name's Sharon, but everyone around here calls her Karen with the clipboard. She was elected HOA president within 6 weeks of moving in. Fast-talking, surgically polite, and always armed with a 3-ring binder full of laminated rules. You'd think she was running for Congress the way she lobbied for stricter regulations on mailboxes and lawn gnomes. At first, I didn't think much of her. Whispering Hills wasn't my world. But Karen, she made my farm her business. It started with a letter taped to my gate. Then another, and another. Noise complaints about my harvesters. Unreasonable odor emissions. Visual disruption from unsightly silos. She even said my composting bins were lowering her community's aesthetic value. Imagine that, a compost bin ruining her manicured horizon. Then came the in-person visits. I was checking irrigation lines one afternoon when she strolled right up clipboard clutched like a sheriff's badge. "You know," she said, "your tractors are very loud at 6 a.m. We have working professionals trying to sleep in. Perhaps you could adjust your hours?" I just stared at her. "Ma'am, this is a farm. The sun doesn't touch a time clock." She gave me a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "We'll be in touch." And they were, constantly. Petitions to rezone the land. Complaints to the county board. A formal request to plant privacy-friendly conifers along the shared property line to enhance neighborhood tranquility. All this over my land. At first, I tried to ignore her. Then I tried being polite. Then I went quiet. I thought, maybe if I kept my head down and kept working, she'd lose interest. But the thing about people like Karen, they don't want peace. They want control. And as I would come to learn, she wasn't just annoying. She was dangerous. I've always believed the land has a way of warning you, subtle signs when something's about to go wrong. A dry patch where it shouldn't be, or birds flying off too early in the morning. Lately, it wasn't the land giving me signs. It was them. It started small, just more letters, printed in that sterile serif font that screams suburban passive aggression. "We regret to inform you that your early morning equipment operations are disruptive to the residential serenity of Whispering Hills." Residential serenity, that was the phrase she loved to use. I had a folder by then, labeled it Karen Chronicles, for my own sanity. First was the noise complaint, then a claim that the chemical odor from my fertilizer was causing health issues. I run fully organic. No chemicals. No synthetic anything. I use neem oil and garlic spray. For God's sake. But when I sent over the documentation to the county to shut the complaint down, another one popped up. Drainage runoff. Then invasive plant species. Then unpermitted equipment storage. Every time I disproved one, a new one took its place. It wasn't about the truth. It was about wearing me down. Then they started marking their territory. Literally. One morning I came out to find a new sign drilled into a tree near my east boundary. Private property. No trespassing. HOA enforced. In bold red. Problem was, it wasn't their property. The sign sat 20 yards into my alfalfa field. At first I thought it was a prank. Maybe some overzealous new homeowner with a hammer and too much free time. But when I went to pull it down, a man came out from the trees, dressed in joggers, HOA lanyard swinging around his neck. "I'd leave that sign up," he said. I gave him a long look. "You're standing on my land." He smiled. The HOA's legal team believes the boundary lines are flexible. "You might want to check your deed." That got under my skin. I had checked my deed. My family's had this land since before property lines were drawn in ink. But I didn't say that. I just took the sign down and walked away. That afternoon, 3 more signs went up closer to my barn this time. Then came the irrigation incident. It was the end of a long harvest day, and I was checking the main drip line out near the east perimeter. The water pressure had dropped off earlier than it should have. I thought maybe a valve had blown. Instead, I found the line severed clean through. Not chewed by animals. Not rotted. Just sliced. Precision cut. No tracks, no camera coverage out that far. Nothing I could take to the sheriff. I patched it. Quietly. But something turned in me that night. They weren't just annoyed by my presence. They were trying to push me. They wanted to make life uncomfortable. To pressure me into giving up a few feet, then a few more. It wasn't about peace or boundaries. It was about control. I started hearing things at night. Engines idling at the edge of the field. Flashlights flickering through the trees. A drone buzzed past my silo one morning, just after sunrise. Coincidence? Maybe. But when I asked Karen about it, the next time she made one of her courtesy visits, she just smiled. "Oh, I think one of our members recently bought a drone for recreational use. Isn't it wonderful how we can now monitor our surroundings from the sky?" That was the first time she used the word monitor. I started watching them as closely as they were watching me. Every Tuesday, the HOA held board meetings, always recorded, always neatly transcribed. I had a friend on the inside send me a few recordings. I wasn't shocked to hear my name come up. What surprised me was the tone. They weren't angry, they were strategic. "His land's underutilized. If he won't sell, maybe easement pressure could force a decision. I've got a contact at zoning. Let's explore green space expansions." They talked about me like I was an obstacle in a real estate deal. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about a view or some self-righteous noise complaint. This was about expansion. My land was a problem because it stood between them and their future. A future with private walking trails, boutique picnic grounds, and eco-branding for property values. They didn't see a farm. They saw acreage. And Karen, clipboard in hand, had every intention of claiming it. HOA bulldozed 500 acres of my family's farmland. Drainage runoff. Then invasive plant species. Then unpermitted equipment storage. Every time I disproved one, a new one took its place. It wasn't about the truth. It was about wearing me down. Then they started marking their territory. Literally. One morning I came out to find a new sign drilled into a tree near my east boundary. Private property. No trespassing. HOA enforced. In bold red. Problem was, it wasn't their property. The sign sat 20 yards into my alfalfa field. At first I thought it was a prank. Maybe some overzealous new homeowner with a hammer and too much free time. But when I went to pull it down, a man came out from the trees, dressed in joggers, HOA lanyard swinging around his neck. "I'd leave that sign up," he said. I gave him a long look. "You're standing on my land." He smiled. "The HOA's legal team believes the boundary lines are flexible. You might want to check your deed." That got under my skin. I had checked my deed. My family's had this land since before property lines were drawn in ink. But I didn't say that. I just took the sign down and walked away. That afternoon, 3 more signs went up closer to my barn this time. Then came the irrigation incident. It was the end of a long harvest day, and I was checking the main drip line out near the east perimeter. The water pressure had dropped off earlier than it should have. I thought maybe a valve had blown. Instead, I found the line severed clean through. Not chewed by animals. Not rotted. Just sliced. Precision cut. No tracks, no camera coverage out that far. Nothing I could take to the sheriff. I patched it. Quietly. But something turned in me that night. They weren't just annoyed by my presence. They were trying to push me. They wanted to make life uncomfortable. To pressure me into giving up a few feet, then a few more. It wasn't about peace or boundaries. It was about control. I started hearing things at night. Engines idling at the edge of the field. Flashlights flickering through the trees. A drone buzzed past my silo one morning, just after sunrise. Coincidence? Maybe. But when I asked Karen about it, the next time she made one of her courtesy visits, she just smiled. "Oh, I think one of our members recently bought a drone for recreational use. Isn't it wonderful how we can now monitor our surroundings from the sky?" That was the first time she used the word monitor. I started watching them as closely as they were watching me. Every Tuesday, the HOA held board meetings, always recorded, always neatly transcribed. I had a friend on the inside send me a few recordings. I wasn't shocked to hear my name come up. What surprised me was the tone. They weren't angry, they were strategic. "His land's underutilized. If he won't sell, maybe easement pressure could force a decision. I've got a contact at zoning. Let's explore green space expansions." They talked about me like I was an obstacle in a real estate deal. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about a view or some self-righteous noise complaint. This was about expansion. My land was a problem because it stood between them and their future. A future with private walking trails, boutique picnic grounds, and eco-branding for property values. They didn't see a farm. They saw acreage. And Karen, clipboard in hand, had every intention of claiming it. Let them think I'm just the farmer. Let them see the dirt under my nails. The sun-worn clothes, the quiet drawl that makes city folks underestimate you. That's always been my advantage. People look at me and think I belong behind a tractor, not behind a boardroom table. That's fine. Because while Karen was busy playing queen of her cul-de-sac, I was charting every thread she didn't know I controlled. The land wasn't my only inheritance. My father spent his life building the farm. I expanded it first by adding a cold storage unit, then by launching a small delivery route to supply local markets. That small route grew, partnerships were formed. Eventually, I founded Harvest Grid, the region's largest organic distribution network. We deliver to 117 grocery stores, 43 school districts, and 19 restaurants across 3 counties. And guess who eats up our produce like it's a lifestyle brand? Whispering Hill. They're high-end groceries, stocked through a vendor who depends entirely on my supply line. Their kids' private school cafeteria uses locally sourced produce. Mine. Even their overpriced juice bar in the clubhouse serves smoothies made from berries picked on my soil. Karen bulldozed my field, thinking she'd knocked down some hay bales and hoop houses. She had no idea she'd stirred up the man who feeds her neighborhood. So, I stayed quiet. I kept my head down. While my lawyer compiled evidence for the civil suit, I pulled shipment manifests, vendor maps, logistics charts. I highlighted every dependency they had. Every point of failure. I didn't have to raise a hand. All I had to do was shift a few orders, delay a few trucks, reassign some supply contracts. Let scarcity do the talking. But that wasn't all I found. As we were gathering documentation for the lawsuit, Rick, my attorney, ran a background dive into Whispering Hills' land use filings. He flagged something odd. The HOA's so-called Green Space Initiative, the same one they used to justify bulldozing my field, wasn't part of any approved county plan. In fact, the parcel wasn't listed in any legal annexation request at all. Take a look at this, Rick said, sliding the file across the table at me. This project was funded through what they're calling community impact dues. What the hell is that? An unapproved special assessment, he said. They passed it internally through the HOA board without external authorization, billed it under environmental beautification, and funneled it into this greenbelt project. It's not just illegal, it's embezzlement. Even worse, Karen signed off on it, alone. No board co-signatures, no votes recorded in the HOA minutes. Just one document, stamped with a forged notary seal. We had it all: digital trail, altered invoices, a backdated zoning request that never cleared. She wasn't just pushing boundaries, she was committing fraud. That changed everything. This wasn't a zoning dispute anymore. It was a federal offense. But I didn't go to the authorities. Not yet. Timing was everything. Let them believe I was licking my wounds. Let Karen strut around her marble kitchen, thinking she'd run off the hillbilly with a backhoe and a bogus permit. She didn't know that I was already in motion. Because when you control the food, you don't need to knock on doors. You own the table. And I was about to flip it. They took 500 acres of my land, so I took their comfort. Quietly. Without warning. While Karen was busy posing for community newsletters, bragging about the HOA's commitment to sustainability, I was rewriting supply routes with surgical precision. Not a full shutdown that would have drawn too much attention. Just enough disruption to make things inconvenient. At first, it started with a delay. A single shipment of organic milk bound for the Whispering Hills fresh and local grocer was rerouted to a regional hospital in need. Then a truck of heirloom tomatoes missed its drop-off due to a driver reassignment. The next week, 5 vendors in the HOA zip code saw adjusted priority status moved to the back of the distribution line under the seasonal availability clause. It was all perfectly legal. They weren't under contract for guaranteed delivery. No one was. And when supply tightened, priority shifted to clients who paid early, respected land use boundaries, and didn't destroy a multi-generational farm overnight. By week 3, the shelves started thinning. First it was the specialty items, microgreens, artisanal flour, oat milk, quinoa, then it crept into the staples. Organic eggs were out of stock for 9 straight days. Local strawberries, supplier issue. Kale and broccoli marked up 200%. The HOA members began to notice. Parents at the charter school complained that the lunch program was serving canned beans instead of fresh produce. One mom posted in the community Facebook group, blaming supply chain corruption. Another claimed Whole Foods had abandoned them. Inside the HOA boardroom, panic was setting in. They blamed inflation first, then fuel costs, then truck driver shortages. Karen even suggested the distributor was mismanaging their inventory. She had no idea the distributor was me.
Didn't say a word.
While they flailed, my legal team moved. We filed a $7.5 million civil lawsuit for unlawful land destruction, environmental degradation, and agricultural loss. The filings were airtight: drone footage, timestamps, fake permits, expert environmental assessments. The bulldozers had destroyed not just crops, but carefully nurtured soil ecosystems that would take years to restore. The complaint was hand-delivered to HOA council and faxed directly to Karen's desk. And still, I said nothing. I let the silence press in on them. Let their internal emails buzz with paranoia. Let the homeowners whisper about food shortages and lawsuits in morning Pilates class. One of my drivers overheard 2 board members arguing in the store parking lot. Something about Karen going rogue, and this is getting out of control. Good, because it was never about shouting them down. It was about making them feel the absence. Every grocery cart missing staples. That was me. Every panicked board meeting scrambling for solutions. That was me. Every HOA family forced to shop outside their overpriced bubble, wondering why their neighborhood wasn't being served. That was me. I wanted them to feel powerless. Not because I hated them, most of them were just sheep, but because they had allowed Karen to believe she could trespass into someone's life, raise their legacy, and walk away like it was landscaping. And now the wolf was in the fold. By the 2nd month, Karen called an emergency town integrity meeting, complete with folding chairs, bottled water, and a podium draped in HOA-branded fabric. I watched the live stream. She stood there in front of her neighbors, lips pursed, talking about temporary disruptions and economic volatility. She never once mentioned the lawsuit. Not the $7.5 million damages hanging over their heads. Not the county investigation into forged documents now quietly underway. Just vague reassurances, masked panic behind her polished veneer. And that was the point. She thought she could bulldoze my life and keep hers pristine. But I'd built more than fields. I'd built infrastructure. I'd built a network so wide and so deep that when I pulled back, she felt it in every aisle, every lunch tray, every HOA fridge. That's not petty. That's pressure. And pressure changes everything. I gave her everything: copies of the falsified documents, drone footage of the destruction, legal proof of zoning violations. I even let her sit in on one of our calls with the county office, where the clerk flat out confirmed there was never a right-of-way filed by Whispering Hills or its HOA. Lydia didn't write a story. She launched a series. Headline 1. Local HOA accused of illegally seizing private farmland for green space project. It ran with side-by-side images. One of my raised crop rows, the other of Karen standing in front of the HOA's clubhouse, smiling in a pastel suit. The caption, community leader or land raider. Karen responded exactly how I hoped. Publicly, arrogantly, and without legal counsel. The land in question was underutilized and unattractive, she told Lydia in a follow-up piece. We simply acted in the interest of neighborhood harmony. Neighborhood harmony. She said that while standing on 500 acres of destruction that didn't belong to her, she may as well have waved the red flag herself. Headline 2. We simply acted. HOA president defends bulldozing private farm without legal permit. That was the tipping point. The town turned. See, this wasn't just about me anymore. Karen had come to Oak Ridge from somewhere else. She never tried to understand the history of this place. Never respected the land. And now her smug quotes were printed across every mailbox and gas station bulletin board in the county. People started talking. Farmers. Retirees. Parents whose kids couldn't get organic produce at school anymore. Calls flooded the county office, demanding answers. Local radio shows lit up with angry voices. If they can take his land, who's next? Someone asked. I didn't have to say a word. That's when the county investigator came knocking. Turns out Lydia's story sparked more than outrage. It raised red flags in the treasurer's office. A formal inquiry was launched into Whispering Hills' HOA budget, specifically the so-called Community Beautification Initiative that funded the bulldozers. And oh, did they find the green space project was paid for through unlawful special assessments, billed quietly to homeowners under vague terms, like enhanced living surcharge. Karen had orchestrated it behind closed doors, funneled funds through shell expense categories, and bypassed the board for every major decision. A forged notary stamp on the permit was just the start. Misappropriation, document tampering, potential wire fraud. They opened the books. They didn't like what they saw. Within 2 weeks, vendors began pulling out. A landscaping company canceled its HOA contract, citing ethical concerns. A cleaning service followed. The community's favorite dog walking app blacklisted their zip code. HOA members started whispering in checkout lines, questioning where their dues had gone, who had approved what, and why they weren't told. And then the lawsuits came. A class action suit from within the HOA filed by 14 of its own homeowners claimed mismanagement of funds and fraud. They used Lydia's articles as evidence. My lawsuit still loomed, but now it was just one of many. Karen tried to regroup. She sent out a newsletter claiming she was the target of a coordinated smear campaign led by anti-development extremists. No one bought it. I watched from the porch most evenings. Peaceful again, at last. Just me, the wind, and a cup of black coffee, while her empire caved in on itself, brick by brick. Funny thing is, I never raised my voice. I never swung a fist. I just told the truth and let everyone watch her lie. By the time the third article hit front pages, the HOA was in full meltdown mode. What started as whispers became declarations. Board members resigned in rapid succession, first the treasurer, then the vice chair, and finally the secretary. who left a scathing public letter pinned to the community bulletin board. I will not stand beside criminal arrogance masquerading as leadership. The house Karen built was rotting from the inside. And the rot couldn't stay hidden anymore. It started with a whistleblower, an assistant bookkeeper named Melanie who'd been quietly updating the HOA's accounts for 6 months. She stepped forward to the county investigator with spreadsheets, receipts, and emails that cracked the whole thing wide open. Turns out the so-called eco-expansion project wasn't just illegal, it was worsenal. Karen had siphoned over $80,000 in HOA dues, line items marked for landscaping upgrades and community art initiatives, and rerouted them to private contractors working exclusively on her parcel vision. She even floated a $12,000 consulting fee to a shell LLC that, once traced, was revealed to be tied to her husband's cousin. It wasn't just about my land. It was about her brand. Karen had been using Whispering Hills as a testbed for her dream project, Sustainable Suburbia. A real estate campaign she planned to market statewide, complete with drone footage of greenbelts, eco-trails, and yoga lawns. She needed my field as the crown jewel. When I wouldn't give it, she tried to take it. And now the whole scheme was crumbling. Fraud, destruction of private property, misappropriation of funds, forgery. She was slapped with multiple charges, all served within 48 hours. A photo of her in handcuffs hit the evening news. Her sunglasses crooked, mouth tight as a drum. Her real estate license revoked. Her public image an ash heap. The very people who once sipped rosé at her backyard socials were now standing on her lawn with clipboards, petitioning to dissolve the HOA entirely. I watched from a distance as they gathered signatures in folding chairs in shame. People who'd once accused me of disturbing the peace now nodded respectfully when they passed my property line. No more fake signs, no more drone flyovers, just silence. And then they got the votes. The Whispering Hills Homeowners Association was officially terminated by community vote. No more dues, no more board, no more Karen. The gates came down within the month. The manicured eco-walkway near the ridge grew wild and unkept. Nature began reclaiming the edges, as if the land itself was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. Karen moved out shortly after the charges dropped. Rumor is she left in the middle of the night, boxes stuffed into the back of a borrowed SUV. The house sat empty for a while. The for sale sign out front didn't last long, though. No one wants to live in a neighborhood made famous for fraud. As for me, I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. I just went back to the work. The field is still recovering. Soil takes time to heal. But I've got cover crops growing now, and the irrigation lines are restored. Some things can't be undone. But justice has roots. And once it's planted, it doesn't go quietly. The courtroom smelled like paper and polish, clean, clinical, but tense. Like the air knew what was coming. Karen sat at the defendant's table, flanked by a lawyer she could barely look in the eye. Her hair was perfectly styled, her blazer immaculate, but her hands fidgeted beneath the table. I watched her try to pull off poise, but the smug confidence she once carried like a weapon was long gone, replaced by something hollow and twitching. She tried to play the victim, said she had been misled by advisors, that the permit mistake was a clerical error, and that she had acted with the best interests of the community in mind. Her lawyer painted her as a misunderstood civic leader, a woman vilified for caring too much. But truth doesn't bend under spin. It holds. We opened with drone footage, the wide, stomach-churning sweep of leveled soil, torn irrigation lines, and harvest-ready crops flattened beneath steel treads. The judge leaned forward. Jurors did too. Then came the contractors. 3 of them. All of them testified that they were hired by the HOA. 2 admitted they were handed a permit printed on non-government letterhead and told not to worry about verification. 1 showed the text message from Karen herself, green bubble and all, telling him, "The farmer won't be an issue, just start clearing east to west." My attorney Rick laid it all out with quiet force. No theatrics. Just documents, time-stamped communications, zoning records, environmental impact statements, tax assessments. We had everything. Karen's forged documents, forensically exposed. Her misuse of HOA funds, traced and confirmed. Even the rebranding campaign, Sustainable Suburbia, was entered into evidence, along with receipts showing how she used HOA dues to bankroll her mock-up website and promotional video. Her voice cracked on day 2. By day 3, she stopped showing up for recess breaks. By the 4th, she sat slumped, her chair pulled slightly back from the table like she wanted to vanish behind it. I didn't smile. Not once. I didn't need to. When the judge returned from chambers, the room fell silent. She looked at Karen, then at me. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Whitman. Damages awarded in full. $7 plus court fees, plus a county-ordered reforestation and soil rehabilitation project to be fully funded by what remained of the now-defunct HOA's reserve account. But that wasn't the part that stuck. The judge added a final clause, one I hadn't even requested. The bulldozed acreage, she said, is hereby recognized under the County Agricultural Trust Preservation Act. This land is to remain zoned as agricultural in perpetuity, untouchable by residential or commercial developers. Karen twitched. It was over. And I'd won. But the final blow came weeks later, in a quieter setting, an interview with a local education board. I'd been working behind the scenes, even before the trial, to secure a partnership with the regional school district. I offered the newly protected land, once my ruined fields, as the site for a sustainable farming camp. A place where kids could learn soil science, seed saving, water conservation, where the next generation could touch the earth with respect, instead of contempt. They agreed. The project was approved unanimously. Lydia, the journalist, covered the story. It ran with a photo of me standing in the field beside 2 kids planting wildflowers, a sign behind us that read, "Future site of Whitman Youth Agricultural Center." Karen saw it. I know she did. How? A friend at the courthouse told me she burst into tears the moment she read the article pinned to the lobby bulletin board. They said she just stood there, trembling, until someone came and helped her outside. That was the only time I felt anything close to pity. But it passed. She had tried to wipe my family's legacy off the map. Instead, she handed me the tools to wield something permanent, something stronger than any gate or clipboard or phony permit could ever stand against. They took my land. Now I teach kids how to protect theirs. That's not revenge. That's a harvest. And I planted it myself. It's a crisp morning, the kind that smells like soil and pencil shavings. Early fall, just after the first frost kissed the leaves but before the ground turned stubborn. I'm standing in front of 20 middle schoolers, holding up a worm-covered trowel, watching their faces twist between curiosity and mild horror. They're here for a hands-on workshop on soil health. The irony's not lost on me. Most of these kids come from what used to be Whispering Hills. The HOA that tried to bury me now sends its next generation to me to learn how to work the land. Not that they know who I am, or what happened. To them, I'm just Mr. Whitman, the farm guy with the faded ball cap who talks out compost like it's magic. They don't know this patch of earth was once ground zero for their parents' HOA's ambition. They don't know how close it came to being a walking trail or a brochure backdrop. That's fine. I don't need them to know. I just need them to listen when I talk about what food really means, how independence begins with your hands in the dirt, and how power isn't held in bank accounts or boardrooms but in seeds, water, and patience. They plant tomatoes today. Tiny, fragile sprouts in a raised bed, built from reclaimed wood. I show them how to tuck the roots in gently, not press too hard. One boy asks if the tomatoes will grow fast enough to eat before winter. I smile and say, not if you rush it, but if you do it right, they'll be sweeter come spring. Later, we walk through the teaching field, 2 acres carved out from the very ground Karen once flattened with bulldozers. Now there are learning stations, rain barrels, compost systems, and rows of kale and carrots. A girl points at the kale and says, "Hey, this looks like the stuff in our school lunches." She's right. It is. Our produce grown on what's left of my family farm, packaged by my company, now supplies their school cafeteria, just like it did before, just like it will for years to come. They eat what we grow. They just don't know it comes from me. And that's the beauty of it. Because while Karen tried to erase a legacy, all she did was make room for something stronger. She's long gone now. Moved out of state after the lawsuits and criminal charges piled up. Word is she filed for bankruptcy and took a job at a real estate agency in Arizona, far from any land she could ruin again. She left quietly, the way arrogance always does once it's lost its spotlight. But her legacy? It's still here, just not the one she intended. Every time her old neighbors bite into a salad, pour oat milk over their cereal, or unpack organic strawberries for their kids' lunches, they're touching what she tried to destroy. They're feeding their children with the land she desecrated, with the company she underestimated, with the farmer she thought was beneath her. I never needed applause. I never needed vengeance. I just needed the land to speak again. And it does now, in every sprout, every lunchbox, every muddy pair of shoes that walks through this soil with a lesson to learn. So, no, I didn't just get justice. I got something better. I'm still feeding them. And I always will. Ever had your peace threatened by someone with a clipboard and too much power? Then you already know this wasn't just my fight, it's ours. Stand for your land. Remember your roots. And never underestimate the man with dirt under his nails. Because the next story might be yours. And we'll be right here when it is.